limit. Arms open now, touch the sky, there's no limit, no limit. It's like painting a never-ending picture, not in black and white, in neon blazing colors. It's like driving on a never-ending road. The more you hit the gas, the more you gotta go. We can make a change. Nothing's in our way. We can play it safe, or we can lead the way. Yeah, we can lead the way today. Yeah, we can lead the way today. Yeah, we can lead the way. We can make a change. Nothing's in our way. We can make a change, and we can lead the way. Yeah, we can lead the way today. We can make a change. Nothing's in our way.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for joining us today at our first JNFuture Leadership Development Initiative. Please note that all attendees during the main portion of the program will be muted. If you have a question for our speaker or professionals, please send it in the chat. After Ron finishes presenting, we will get to as many questions as we can. We will also open for Q&A at the end. Should you have any technical difficulties over the next 45 minutes, rest assured there will be a recording. For optimal viewing, please make sure you are in speaker view, not gallery view, which can be found in the top right corner of your screen. If you are interested in learning more about Jewish National Fund, please contact Stephanie Altman at saltman, it's SALTMAN, at jnf.org.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Josh Goodkin, and I am the Vice President of Leadership on the National JNFuture Board and President of the Central New Jersey JNFuture Board. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you all Ron Nearing, member of the San Diego Board of Directors and National Speakers Bureau Committee. Ron Nearing is an international educational leader currently serving as a Director of International Programs at the Leadership Institute, one of the most renowned training organizations in the country. He trains individuals in governance, strategic planning, and communications more than 50 times each year around the world. He's an accomplished statesman, a pillar in this community, and a steadfast ally of Israel and the Jewish people. Take it away, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to let me share my screen here. Josh, thank you very much, and thank you to Sarah and Stephanie and everyone else who's worked real hard to put this program together today. I particularly appreciate that fine eulogy. I appreciate that. I can't wait to get back on the road again, and including to go back to Israel, because I want to pick up more of these. I keep this in my office. This is a minefield sign from the Golan Heights. And if you need a great souvenir from Israel, just go up to the Golan Heights. These are laying all over the place. Feel free to pick one up. And they didn't even stop me in the airport. You know, I used to travel 50 times a year around the world, and now I just do 50 Zoom meetings a day, like everybody else. But what I've been asked to talk about a little bit today is well, let's put it up on the screen here what we're going to talk about today. A little bit about the relationship between leadership and communications, to give all of you a couple of things to think about going forward, to understand a bit about how people make judgments and choices, and some of the qualities that people look for in a leader. I've given this presentation probably more than 200 times, over the years. And very often when you share with people concepts about communicating, very often it gets right to the, what should our vocabulary be? What should our message be? And so on and so forth. And today I want to take a step back and start with the fact that we have to understand how people make judgments and choices, both about individuals, organizations, and situations. And to that end, I want to share with you a video that has nothing to do with politics. And this presentation doesn't have to do with politics, but I'm going to ask you one question. When you watch this ad, which is a non-political ad, I'm just going to ask you to think about, if you had to choose which one of the two people in this ad is probably the conservative, think about that. And then I'm going to ask a follow-up question. And again, we're not going to talk about politics, but I want to go into a little, I'm using this as an example of how people make judgments. So let's take a look at this spot. And then it runs 30 seconds long. Some of you who are older may have seen this before on TV, but let's take a look.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Ready to get started?
Well, not quite. Got a lot to do. What's your big plan?
I might make a home movie or maybe create a website, try out my built-in camera. I can do it all right out of the box, so what about you?
Well, first I got to download those new drivers, and I got to erase the trial software that came on my hard drive.
Sweet.
And I've got a lot of manuals to read.
You know, it sounds like you have a lot of stuff to do before you do any stuff, so I'm just going to get started because I'm kind of excited. Let me know when you're ready.
Actually, the rest of me's in some other boxes, so I'll meet up with you later.
So that's Apple does such great work in advertising. And if you had to, if someone said, okay, one of these two people is a conservative, which one would you choose? And if we were together in the same room, then we would have that discussion. But I'll kind of skip over that. What I've asked this question on 4 different continents, and the vast majority of the respondents typically say that the person on the left is probably the conservative. And then I go on to ask, well, why? On what basis would you draw that conclusion? Some people will point to what they said. The guy on the left was very process-oriented. The person on the right was very action-oriented. Some other people might go by what they look like, the visuals. The person on the left is in a boring suit. That's probably not an Armani suit, but kind of dull-looking. He's got kind of a dull haircut. He's wearing a watch. He's wearing glasses. And he's in that brown box, which is, no doubt done on purpose. Whereas the person on the right appears younger and so on. And then other people might point to what they did. The person on the right jumps out of the box, is more active. The person on the left, more awkward, doesn't get out of the box, seems a bit trapped there. So, but the more important question is, did it take you longer to come up with the conclusion, or did it take you longer to come up with the reasons why you drew the conclusion? And when you think about it, you probably drew the conclusion right away, and it probably took you longer to come up with the reasons why. And that's interesting because it runs counter to how most people believe that they make decisions. Well, I'm a very rational person. I carefully consider all of the various factors before drawing a very rational, defensible conclusion. And every Ferrari dealer knows that that's not how people make decisions, right? People tend to make a judgment first, and then they back it up later. And at the heart of that is the distinction between intuition and reasoning. Intuition is when we see something, we make a judgment, we make a choice, we do that automatically, and we do that without thinking. Reasoning, we tend to use very rarely by comparison. Reasoning is used when we're either explaining or persuading, and it's conscious and not automatic. It's a more advanced task that our mind performs. Most of the decisions, most of the judgments that each of us makes in a given day, of which there are hundreds and hundreds, are made based upon our intuition, not invoking our reasoning. And to put it visually, if one of these is the intuition and another is judgment, which one would the intuition be? Well, it's the elephant. In this picture, the elephant is analogous to our intuition. It's big, it's dominant, it's stronger, and it's going to go where it wants to go. The rider is more like our reasoning, and a bit more sophisticated, weaker, And who works for whom? Well, it turns out that the rider works for the elephant, meaning our reasoning works for our intuition. Our reasoning tends to be used to back up our intuition, because intuition is automatic. It's a response to things that we recognize, and we make judgments or choices based upon what we know or based on what we believe to be true. And how this might work together is, and here's an example from the days when we were not all trapped at home, but if you're going to be late, really, really late coming home, and said you were going to be home at 3 o'clock and you come wandering in at 11:30. If you're the guy in the tie in this picture, you know that this is not going to be pleasant. You know intuitively that this is going to be unpleasant. It doesn't take a lot of brain power to figure that out. So what happens is, while you're driving home or at some point beforehand, you call upon the reasoning part of your brain to come up with all of the reasons why you shouldn't be yelled at. I was at this great JNF program. I met these wonderful people. I learned a lot, and for a good cause, and on and on and on and on. The reasoning backs up our intuition. And in strategic communications, when we're communicating with people, we have a limited amount of bandwidth, because chances are whoever we're communicating with does not think about whatever our topic is nearly as much as we do. Whether that's politics, whether that's public affairs, whether that's advertising, whether that's fundraising, whatever it is, chances are the audience does not pay as much of attention to the topic as we do, and therefore we only have a very limited slice of their attention in order to get a point across. And that means that the advantage goes to the side that reaches people intuitively. We are sending signals all of the time, visual, verbal, and behavioral, that can trigger a positive response or trigger a negative response in people. And when people meet us, or when they hear our pitch, when they're interacting with us, or when they're watching someone on television or in a video, etc., there's going to be some type of reaction, and it works something like this. People see signals, they come from us, and then they process that, and they immediately come to an initial response within just a few seconds to a minute. And that response is across a spectrum. It's not a binary choice. It's somewhere across this spectrum, ranging from acceptance to rejection. And the best scenario is that people intuitively respond very positively to us, and they accept whatever our proposition is, and we're off to the races. At the other end of the other extreme here is rejection. And in that case, if someone initially rejects us or rejects our message, then we have to pull them back over to the acceptance side, and that requires reasoning with them. And the difference here is that the left side, what we call the intuitive pathway, is cheap and easy. The reasoning and persuasive pathway is expensive and hard, and much less likely to be successful. So we have to be conscious of what are the signals that we are sending, consciously or not, that are going to drive people between acceptance or rejection. And we've all experienced this. There's someone new you meet, and they just come off wrong. You just don't like the person for whatever reason. That's your intuition making that judgment. You don't necessarily articulate it, because you don't necessarily have to, but we have that initial response. There are other people who we meet who we instantaneously respond to them very warmly. And I'm going to recommend a book that you take a look at that can give you a wealth of information on this as well. So intuitively, what are some of the qualities that people look for in a leader? What are some of the qualities that people intuitively want to see in a leader? Well, we don't have to guess about that. We actually know that pretty well from a wealth of studies and research and so on. And there really are about 6 qualities that people look for in a leader, and they look for that intuitively. It's not necessarily something that we go around and say, hey, I have this quality, look at this here, but it's more something that people discern from our actions and how we conduct ourselves. Number 1 is having a vision, and that is leaders help people to see and aspire to goals. And intuitively, we want to do that. We want to have goals to improve our community, improve our organization, improve our lot in life, etc. And that vision is very important when sacrifice is involved. And anyone who's involved with JNFuture, a donor, etc., they're all making sacrifices. They're either making sacrifices of their time, or they're making sacrifices of money, or both. It's astonishing the number of people in JNF who choose to sacrifice both. It's an extraordinary organization. I've noted on more than one occasion that JNF is so amazing because you have people who actually volunteer to join a task force, which then costs you somewhere between $5,000 and $100,000. And then once you join the task force, the work is not over. Then you have to work. Then you have to go to Israel. You got to pay for the trip yourself. You got to go serve on a task force. You actually have to go to work, and you buy yourself a job for an annual contribution. It's extraordinary. But why do people do that? In part because people are seeing a vision on the part of those who are in leadership positions. I'm going to leave this with you, and Stephanie and Sarah and company will have a copy of this presentation. You can go through exercise in the future, but what's your vision for JNFuture, for an organization that you're leading, etc. If you're successful, what would this look like a year or two from now? How does this differ from other organizations with the same goal? So quality number one is vision, but vision itself is not enough. I've shared with people that if all you want to do is focus on vision, then you can be a philosopher or an artist, etc. You can just focus on vision. But the second quality is the ability to turn vision into reality. People tend to have short attention span for leaders who are only about talk. But leaders who've demonstrated that they can get something done, that they can get something accomplished, they tend to hold on to that attention longer and to be taken more seriously. So what are some things that you have done where you've actually overcome an obstacle, where you've turned vision into reality? And it doesn't necessarily have to be within JNF. It could be somewhere else in your life where you got something done and accomplished something. Here's a picture of Yad Vashem, which is no small accomplishment. So leaders are expected to get things done. I'm going to skip over the exercises, Stephanie and Sarah, but you can share, and Josh, and you can share those with people as we go forward. Number three is leaders have strength, and this can be difficult, by the way, for men and women, but it can be difficult in different ways. There's a tendency for some men to believe that you come across as strong by demonstrating anger or lack of patience. And people get all scrunchy faced and so on and so forth and wag their finger and so on. And that tends not to be particularly effective. I train candidates all the time, and those candidates who feel like they need to come across as really angry, I just tell them, look, whenever you do that, all you're doing is reminding every woman of her first husband. So don't do any of that. You want to project strength without projecting anger. For women can have a harder time finding this balance because there's a need to project strength while at the same time not coming across unfavorably. We'll put it that way. And so it can be challenging for men and women, but in different ways. But at the end of the day, strength gives a leader grace under fire. Don't ever let anybody see you angry, particularly in front of a group. Never get angry with anybody. Never start, never yell, never take the bait. Even if you're, at a public forum and there's some crazy BDS person gets up and starts, berating you or whatever it is. Don't lose your cool. Don't lose your temper, because you actually get pulled down in the view of the audience. So we never want to. We always want to demonstrate that grace under fire. Quality number four is that leaders are expected to care, and they're expected to care about people other than themselves, their family, their friends, and their associates. This is an important quality. It's what happens when you ask people seriously, genuinely, how are you doing? The last time I saw you, your grandmother wasn't doing so well. How is she doing, etc. Things like that. Where particularly if, Rick Krosnick and I do a presentation on writing, and particularly on writing thank you notes. And we have a whole presentation on how to do this, which we cover at JNF University for incoming professionals. And one of the points that we make there is that when you thank someone, the thank you should be personal to the recipient, but also personal to the signer, so that we're not sending out just generic notes to people, but that we reference, for example, if it's a follow-up to a conversation, we reference the conversation, things that we talked about, etc. Why do we do that? Number one, it's more genuine, it's more effective, but why is that? Because it does demonstrate, it's an opportunity to demonstrate that caring and concern for others. And that can be done visually or through the words that we choose. Number 5 is that leaders are expected to be honest. And it's why if you're serving on if I'm serving on a board with somebody who during the break shares with me how he cheated his car insurance company to cover something that should not have been covered, do I want to do business with that person? Well, they didn't cheat me, they cheated their insurance company. But do I still want to do business with that person? Of course I don't. Of course, their stature in my mind is going to come down because you just shared with me something that was dishonest. And thanks for the heads up. And these are not the type of people you want to work with. And likewise, people in a leadership position are expected to be honest in every aspect of their lives. And that's important because this is what lets you into the game in the first place. Very often in political campaigns, someone's honesty is immediately put in question, if at all possible, because it disqualifies them from playing in the rest of the tournament. Number 6, and the final quality is leaders are expected to treat others fairly. And this is not, sometimes we hear this in terms of being open-minded. Why do we want someone to be open-minded? Because we don't want someone to prejudge every situation before they know something about it. Leaders recognize when others are being exploited, particularly the vulnerable, and are expected to do something about that. For example, when JNF has a program, Special in Uniform, for people who are vulnerable, for people who are disadvantaged, etc., that is demonstrating on an institutional level that we're not just about building homes for people, but here are some of the most vulnerable people in Israeli society, and there's a program that helps them as well. It's really extraordinary how important this is, this quality of fairness. How does this manifest itself if you're on a board? Well, if you're serving on a board and you show up and the leadership of the board, when they're hanging out before the board meeting, is always just talking to themselves and not welcoming other people into the room, that sends a bad message to the person who just entered into the room. Intuitively, they are getting a signal that the leadership is really primarily concerned with themselves and not with the new guy or the new gal. And so there are all of these subtle ways in which this winds up being conveyed to people. So here are your six qualities that people look for in a leader: vision, the ability to turn vision into reality; strength, caring, honesty, and fairness. Let me go on to this point here. And what is the first step on the road to wisdom? And there's many different ways to answer this question, but what I have found in the 32 years of my professional career, the first step on the road to wisdom is humility. And that is so important because people who lack humility are not very good learners. Because if you think you know everything, then you're not really open to what you learn from other people. And if on the other hand, you approach whatever position you are in professionally or in your personal life, etc., from a standpoint of humility, you're going to be more open to learning from people. Every time I speak at JNF University and go into New York, and I'm hanging around people like Russell Robinson and Rick Krosnick and so many other people there, Saul and Lauren, etc. I learn something every single time that I'm there. because I know that I don't know everything. Here are surrounded by people who have, a wealth of experience different from me. And so that's a very important thing to bear in mind. Are you approaching every situation which you're in from a standpoint of humility, that there are things that you don't know, and it's to your advantage to be open to picking up and to learning. Let me also touch upon the importance of culture in an organization and how that relates to the strength of an organization. This is something which we call a donor pyramid. And this is a critically important concept for anyone involved in fundraising. And what this represents visually is that at different levels of giving, people give for different reasons. So at the bottom here, we have our direct response donors. They tend to be very issue driven. These are people who tend to make that $35 or $50 gift online or by direct mail. They're very issue driven, and those appeals tend to be very emotional, those that are the most successful. At the next higher level, we have our social donors, which JNF is so heavily dependent upon, those people who come to events. Now, all of those people who come to the brunch or the breakfast or the dinner or the, whatever, or the parlor meeting, etc., they could give in response to a direct mail letter, but they won't, because for them, giving is kind of like expensive dating. They want to go to something. They want to go to something. They want to go to an event. They want to socialize. They want to have their picture taken, etc. And why do we do it? I hate doing events. I give an entire presentation on how to do events, and my first slide is why not to do an event, because they take all this time, and then there's the possibility of failure, and you have high fixed costs, and so on. But why do we do them? Because that's the only way to reach a certain group of donors. And then at the top, you have your major donors who we tend to reach through personal solicitation. But all of that is built upon this that I just added at the bottom, and that is a positive volunteer donor and activist experience and reputation. The reputation of the group and the people in the group, that reputation runs ahead of you. And so every organization takes on a culture, whether it's a local affiliate or a national organization. You can tell when you go to national conference or when you go to any event, very quickly you intuitively pick up, and there's that word again, intuitive, you intuitively pick up on what the culture is inside of the organization. And that culture is vitally important, because culture tells you what's okay to do when there's no rule. Oh, can I talk smack about the boss? Is it okay to gossip? Is it not? There's no written formal rule about that stuff, but you kind of pick that up. And so it's vitally important for leaders in an organization to influence that culture positively. The people in any organization who have the most influence on the culture are the people who are the closest to the top of the org chart, as they're perceived to be. And a great culture will attract more people, and you have a virtuous cycle of a positive culture, bringing more people in. They learn the culture. They have to learn the culture as they come in. They like it. They bring more people in, and so on. A negative culture, which includes, all the insider stuff and the gossipy kind of stuff and so on, that's a big negative. The whole reason why I got involved in JNF now 6 years ago was following going to Israel on a solidarity mission during Operation Protective Edge, is that I loved the culture of the organization. I work in politics. I was looking for, is there something that's not political that I can get involved with that has great people? And JNF wound up being it. And I've been involved for 6 years, and I've stayed involved. But the number one reason why I've been involved is because of the culture inside. I'm gonna use a political example here, but why does this type of stuff happen? When I first put this presentation together some time ago, this was in the news all the time. All these leaks coming out of the White House. Why do leaks come out of an organization? Leaks occur when you have a bad culture within an organization. It's somebody trying to get somebody else fired because they think that that's an okay thing to do, etc. And I happened to work on another presidential campaign in 2016. We kind of saw this happening from their campaign. And so it was obvious that the White House was going to leak in the same way that the campaign leaked, because the culture was the same. So this is something which, if you're in a leadership position, don't just gloss over this. Don't just believe that the culture inside of the organization, it is what it is. It's not. It's something that's subject to the influence of people who are in leadership there. So this is another exercise. I'm going to skip past that. Leadership drives that culture. Leaders should embody those 6 imperatives that I just walked through. Leaders should have high standards and expectations from people and apply them in a fair manner across the board. Leaders should demonstrate humility and openness to the fact that there will be other people involved who know more, who have different experiences, and should be welcome to share that in a positive and constructive way. There's a concept of an esprit de corps that is present in organizations that are particularly healthy. And that is that notion that we are an elite, dedicated band of warriors who are brought together for a great cause and are moving forward, towards some accomplishment. JNF is exactly that type of an organization. It is a terrific institution of great people who are incredibly talented, who have resources and talent that they can bring to a great cause of building a stronger Israel. The concept of value generation ties into this as well. Culture benefits when people believe that there is some value being generated for the time or money that they are contributing to it. So what is the value that's being generated, for example, right now in this webinar? If we're not generating value, then things kind of fall apart, right? People turn to different things, the phone comes out, etc. So be sure that when you're in a leadership position and you are putting together an event or pulling somebody together, what is the value that's being generated, and is that clear to people that there is that value being generated? And finally, the 6th point is that people should feel they're informed. The number one complaint in organizations that I have seen is, why wouldn't I know? Why didn't someone take the time to let me know, etc. In various positions that I've held, my secret weapon was having a constant contact account when nobody knew what that was, and constantly emailing people, not value-less information, but valuable information all of the time, just letting them know. What's the definition of public relations? Doing good and getting credit for it. Sharing with people what you know, bringing value to them so that they continue to be involved and drawn in. Finally, floggings continue until morale improves. Not a good approach, right? We don't build a positive culture that way. Final couple of points for you. I really want to share with you this book called The Like Switch. For anyone who's involved in fundraising or nonprofit organizations or business or anything in life, this is a very powerful book that I strongly recommend. It's written by Jack Schafer. Jack Schafer is a former FBI behavioral psychologist. And this is about all those nonverbal signals that we send to people that can draw us away, drive us away, or draw people toward us. Facial expressions, how we stand, how we walk towards someone, all these nonverbal signals is really, really cool. One thing that I thought was particularly interesting is that one study found that people who have had Botox treatments, and that probably doesn't apply to anybody in JNFuture, but just roll with me on this one real quick. People who've had Botox on their foreheads to take the wrinkles out of their foreheads have a harder time striking up conversation with people they don't know. And that's because they can't do what's called a flashing of the eyes, where you do this little flash of the eyes where your eyebrows go up and down really quick, and that's a nonverbal signal to send to people that you're open to engaging with them. Well, if you're all kind of Botoxed up, that really doesn't work. So all these amazing little tips that you will pick up from this book, very well worth it. I am kind of on a mission. I have not been on an airplane in 5 months. I have not left my state since March 16th. And one of the things that I'm doing is making sure that looking forward to when things do open back up, that I'm in the strongest position possible. So I'm rereading this book, and I wanted to make sure that I included or recommended it to you. In the book is something called the friendship formula. And if you look at the components here, friendship equals proximity plus frequency plus duration plus intensity. And building an organization where you have that camaraderie, that esprit de corps, really depends on these four things as well. And so think about what can be done in organizations that you're leading that add to that. Proximity, bringing people together. How often are you bringing people together? Groups that meet once a year tend not to be as strong as groups that meet once a month, for example. How long are people together? Do we just get together for 15 minutes or is it longer than that? And then intensity. Is there something that we're doing? Some event we're putting on, for example. It's amazing. Every presidential campaign out there, there's always a bunch of people who get married coming out of that, coming out of the presidential campaign. Why is that? Because in a presidential campaign, you have all of these components together. And that are bringing people together, and all types of things happen. And some of which is worthy of publication, others will just remain unsaid. But nonetheless, think about that. Finally, my last two slides, what makes a communicator particularly strong is being strong in these three areas. Number one is your plans, your ideas. Number two is your narrative, your story. What's your story about? I just did a storytelling presentation for the JNF board in San Diego online yesterday. And it was all about this second component, this ability to tell stories. Statistics, acronyms, billions, trillions, pie charts, et cetera, graphs. None of that moves people, doesn't move people in their heart. So what is your story, or what is the story behind the organization that you're involved in? And then area number three is your skill. And there are techniques for everything that will help, that you can do in your role with JNF or professionally, et cetera. And so having those skills, and if you're strong in all three areas, that really will help a communicator be as strong as possible. And my last slide, great quote from Theodore Roosevelt, who's one of my favorite presidents. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. Meaning, there are sometimes people in an organization may get frustrated over whatever external factors, not being able to change the entire world at once, etc. But just keep in mind this great quote whenever you might get frustrated or run up against something, or you run up against someone else who's frustrated. And do what you can with what you have, where you are. Take a practical approach. There is a matter of there's always these theological, and I don't mean theological in the strict term, but these kind of abstract arguments that people will get in all the time about what should be and so on. In various spheres I'm involved in, we call that the theological argument. But then there's the practical side of this as well. And at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road, there's certain things that have to get done. And so do what you can with what you have, where you are. So that is my entire presentation. That's a little faster than I normally would do it, Josh, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share a couple of ideas with you today. Here's some ways that people can reach me. And I toss it back over to you. It's your meeting. If there's time for questions, happy to take any. Thanks.
So we're now going to open it up for questions. You can either just unmute yourself to ask or put it in the chat if you prefer.
I'll ask a question. Hi, Ron. Thanks for being with us. This is Jeffrey with JNF down in Miami. Thanks for taking the time. And my question to you is more focused on coronavirus and what you've seen in terms of how people have been able to use this moment to successfully develop themselves as better leaders, and how to adjust. You mentioned the like switch and how a lot of that is focused on in-person interaction, which I've read the book because it's really a great book about how to read body language. But how do we utilize some of the teachings in that book to adjust to this moment and be successful now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Number one, I think that the recent experience has proven that as soon as people can get back to doing in-person events, they're going to, because Zoom strips out 90% of the benefit that you get from interacting with people. Think about it. If you go to national conference, is it just what you're seeing? Is it just the plenary sessions, or is it all the people you run into in those sidebar conversations and the exchanging of business cards and following up with people and so on? And all that winds up getting stripped out. The accidental discovery that takes place through events is part of the value of events. And so that's why I can't wait to get past this, and many other people as well. At the same time, there's a whole bunch of techniques when you're meeting with people visually that you can use or not use to be as effective as possible there. And number one of which is to eliminate distractions. There's a great viral video of someone doing an interview with the BBC via Skype, and their little daughter bursts in through the door and is marching through the back of the room while the BBC interview is taking place. And that's kind of cute, but we want to minimize distractions, make sure that you're providing value to people when you're communicating through a format like this. It has to be worth their time, because someone had to get dressed, they had to put pants on, they had to get out of bed. Make it worthwhile that they did so, but then have follow-up as well. Don't let something like this only be a one-time event that happens like this. There should be some type of follow-up and some mechanism for that. Either some exercise, some conversation, some email, etc. It should be part, of a longer continuum for sure. So those are a couple of concepts that I think are worthwhile.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Hey Ron, I'm Adam Slotnick, based out of Boca Raton, Florida. I have a question kind of about, as we say, generational divide. My previous leadership experience or leadership position before this, I was the president of a condo association where everyone else on the board and many in the community were at least twice my age. And I could see, even for myself and others on this call within JNF, where we might be interacting with a different generation of people, what recommendations do you have for dealing with generational divides that can come up during different meetings and interactions?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one that I've actually thought about right now, because I'm on the ballot in November as a candidate for a local planning group, and the planning group deals with local transportation issues and permitting and things like that. And just about everybody on the planning group is a retiree, right? And I'm not a retiree at all. And so I've been thinking about, how do you, if I win and come into that, how do you do that in a way that's not off-putting? And so there is, for people who are, so one concept is when people who are entering something where someone is new, don't just burst in and say, okay, you bunch of morons, you've been screwing this up, I've got a list of things to do, and so on. Borrow some Dale Carnegie and how to win friends and influence people. You can, there are ways to build the relationship first and then take the action afterward. You will be much more successful with people who you've built a relationship with, and then having a task or something that you want to accomplish, than going the other way around. Politics, fundraising, life, business is 75% relationships, and it's 25% everything else. Relationships are built upon what we have in common experiences, common backgrounds, some element that we have in common. So as you meet new people, when you meet someone who is of a different generation, there is naturally a whole basis that you do not, of things that you do not have in common with them. Ask questions of people. Ask questions first. When I'm advising candidates, I advise something that Frank Luntz, the pollster Frank Luntz, has developed, which is listen, learn, help, and then offer to lead. Listen and learn come first, meaning ask people questions. It's like if you go out on a date, and don't be the guy who's just talking about yourself the whole time. Ask questions, demonstrate interest, and tease out information from who you have to work with so that you can find that area of commonality, then zero in on what you have in common, build a relationship, and then try to get something done from there. Otherwise, it's really tough. Otherwise, at its surface, the relationship winds up being about what you don't have in common, because visually and obviously, you're a lot younger than your condo people, and therefore it creates a distance. So number one, find what you have in common, listen first, build that relationship first before taking action, and then use those tools in the light switch to the maximum degree possible, and just win them over first, and then try to get something accomplished. Some people walk in on day one with an agenda to try to pass through a whole bunch of people who don't know them, and that usually ends in failure.
And we have time for about one more question, if anyone else has. All right, Josh.
Thanks, Steph. Ron, I've heard you speak a couple times now, and I feel like every time you get better and better. So I love hearing everything you have to say, and it's always knowledge I can take with me and utilize not only in JNF but in general. So thanks again for all your time today, Ron. Appreciate it. I wanted to thank just everyone for joining us today. Keep an eye out for our monthly JNF Future newsletters, which will have information about all our upcoming events. And to stay up to date, please go to jnffuture.org/on-demand, and you can learn more there. Our next leadership call will be on Tuesday, October 1st, featuring Russell Robinson. And I hope, again, everyone had a nice time today. Everyone learned a little bit about what JNF is doing in Israel, and wish all of you guys a wonderful long weekend coming up, and stay well.
Thanks, everybody.
One seed in the ground is enough to grow a garden. Put in work and watch, it'll turn into a forest. Our roots in the land give us a home, a haven. Stand tall, rise up, together we're united.